Do you think you know Queen Elizabeth I? A name in a history book, a stern gaze from a portrait, a woman in a lavish gown. But that's not the whole truth. Elizabeth wasn't just a monarch. She was a brand engineered with the same cold calculation that political strategists use today. Just imagine her world, a world ruled by men, a world that had watched her own mother be executed and her sister's reign drown in blood. For her, survival was not a given, so she created an image, an impenetrable one, the Virgin Queen, a Protestant deity in pearls and silk who ruled England with a brilliant mind and a grip of steel. Her legacy? The defeat of the Spanish Armada, a golden age of culture, the birth of England as a nation. But that's the glossy cover. What if I told you that behind the shining image of Gloriana, beneath the thick layers of toxic makeup, and behind the tight whalebone corset, hid a personality forged in trauma and fear? She was a ruler torn apart by insecurity, vanity, and a pathological obsession with control. Her public image was her armor, and her daily rituals were the rivets holding it together. And when it came to intimate matters like hygiene, this obsession took on grotesque and dangerous forms. You see, in her era, cleanliness wasn't about health. It was a public performance, a demonstration of status. And Elizabeth turned that performance into a true art of illusion. In this video, we will reveal 5 of the most shocking and little-known facts about the calculated hygiene of Queen Elizabeth I. And the last one, it will make you see the glamour of her golden age in a completely new light. So, where do we begin? With her one all-consuming passion, her greatest weakness, sugar. To understand the scale of the disaster, you need to realize this. In the 16th century, sugar was the new oil, a luxury comparable to gemstones. It was harvested by slaves in distant colonies and shipped to Europe at immense cost. For a common English person, tasting sugar was a once-in-a-lifetime event. But for the Queen, it was a political tool. Her unlimited access to it was a symbol of England's growing power. And she didn't just eat sweets, she flaunted them. Her particular passion was marzipan, from which royal confectioners would mold breathtaking sculptures known as subtleties. These were entire castles, mythical beasts, and biblical scenes made of sugar and almonds. They were served at banquets not to be eaten, but to be admired, a testament to the Queen's wealth. But this sweet performance came at a horrifying price. You have to understand, dentistry wasn't really a thing yet. A toothache was treated with prayers, or a red-hot poker. Instead of a brush, people used a rough cloth, and for fresh breath, they chewed on seeds like anise or cardamom. So what did the Queen do to preserve her teeth? According to some sources, she cleaned them with a paste made of honey and sugar. Yes, you heard that right. She was polishing her teeth with the very substance that was dissolving them. To make matters worse, abrasive powders of brick dust and crushed coral were fashionable, which permanently scraped away the enamel. The result? A slow, agonizing decay. Over time, her smile became a source of morbid fascination for foreign visitors. The German traveler Paul Hensner bluntly noted in his journal in 1598, "Her teeth are black, a defect the English seem to suffer from because of their great use of sugar." Her refusal to see barber surgeons who extracted teeth with unsterilized pliers and no anesthetic was rooted in a deep-seated terror of pain. She would endure throbbing abscesses and infections for years, which poisoned her system and created a foul breath so powerful that courtiers learned to hold scented handkerchiefs to their faces when she spoke. But the wildest part of this story is the court's reaction. Instead of disgust, the Queen's flaw became a fashion trend. Noble women began to intentionally blacken their teeth with soot and coal. A blackened smile became an unspoken code. I am wealthy enough to afford the same ruinous diet as the Queen herself. In the strange personality cult that surrounded Gloriana, even physical decay could be weaponized as a symbol of elite status. You probably know that people in the past bathed infrequently, but for Elizabeth, this wasn't just a matter of convenience. It was a conscious, almost philosophical choice. She deliberately rejected the habits of her own father, Henry VIII. He had adored lavish baths, building what were essentially spa complexes in his palaces, complete with hot and cold water taps. Elizabeth, however, saw this as decadent and deadly dangerous. Why? Because she believed in the prevailing medical theory of miasma. This wasn't just a fear of bad air. Miasma was believed to be a tangible, invisible poison that rose from filth, stagnant water, and rotting organic matter. It was the unseen force blamed for the Black Death, a plague that still haunted the collective memory of Europe. And from this viewpoint, bathing, especially in hot water, was an act of pure madness. It was believed to open the pores of the skin, leaving the body defenseless against invasion by these deadly vapors. So the queen practiced what we might call a dry clean. The cornerstone of her hygiene was the daily, sometimes multiple times a day, changing of her fine linen shifts. Linen was a costly fabric and was believed to have absorbent properties. It literally drew out sweat and impurities from the body. Having a wardrobe of dozens of these shifts was in itself an incredible display of wealth. Instead of washing her face with water, she used lotions made from wine or vinegar. These liquids acted as antiseptics and tightened the skin, which was considered far healthier. And when she did submit to a full bath, perhaps only a few times a year, it was a carefully orchestrated medical procedure. A physician would personally oversee the event. The water would be boiled and infused with herbs like chamomile and thyme, which were thought to neutralize water's harmful qualities. It was a ritual, not relaxation. Her cleanliness was a carefully constructed illusion. Water could wash away her white makeup. It could soften her rigid image. In short, it could make her human. And in the world she built for herself, the queen could not afford to be merely human. Elizabeth's face is an icon. That deathly white, unnaturally smooth mask was her signature, but it wasn't her skin, it was makeup. And that makeup was slowly killing her. In her time, a tan was the mark of a common laborer who toiled in the sun. Aristocratic pallor signaled a life of leisure and nobility. Elizabeth took this ideal to a terrifying extreme, creating a myth of her own, ageless, divine purity. Her primary tool was known poetically as Venetian ceruse. Today we know its composition, a thick paste of lead and vinegar. Applied daily, it created a flawless alabaster finish, concealing the smallpox scars from her youth. But it was a devil's bargain. The lead was absorbed through her skin, slowly poisoning her from the inside. It caused hair loss, digestive problems, and irreversible nerve damage. And here was the vicious cycle. The more the poison disfigured her real skin, the thicker the layers of ceruse she had to apply to hide it. And her famous crimson lips and rosy cheeks? For those, she used vermilion, a brilliant pigment derived from the mineral cinnabar. Chronic mercury poisoning, as we now know, causes memory loss, depression, and violent mood swings. Many contemporaries noted the queen's extremely volatile behavior in the later years of her reign. Why would she do this? Because her face was an instrument of state propaganda. It had to project eternal strength. A special decree was even issued, banning the creation of new realistic portraits of Elizabeth. Artists were commanded to use official face patterns that depicted her as forever young. The famous rainbow portrait was painted when she was nearly 70, but in it, she is an ageless goddess. She was sacrificing her physical health on the altar of her political immortality. The legend of the ever-youthful Gloriana had to be maintained, even if the woman beneath the mask was crumbling. So she's covered in lead and mercury, she hardly bathes. You can imagine the aroma. How did she handle that? To understand, you must understand her deepest fear, vulnerability. She grew up in a world where her own mother was beheaded on trumped-up charges. Her entire childhood was a lesson in how quickly a woman's body could be used against her. Therefore, every aspect of her image was an act of defense, and her most powerful weapon in this battle was scent. She built an impenetrable fortress of fragrance around herself. And these were not the light floral perfumes we know today. They were heavy, overpowering concoctions based on animal products. Her favorite ingredients: ambergris, a waxy substance from the digestive system of sperm whales, civet, a glandular secretion from the civet cat, and musk, from the glands of a musk deer. These pungent animalistic scents were incredibly expensive and extremely potent. Their purpose was not to entice, but to dominate, to annihilate any other scent in the vicinity, including the smell of her own unwashed body. She carried these scents in pomanders, small ornate metal balls on a chain that she could lift to her nose as a personal shield against the stench of the crowded court. Her obsession was so great that she had her own still room for developing new perfumes. Her entire wardrobe of over 80 wigs, which hid her thinning, lead-poisoned hair, was drenched in these scents. Her gloves, her gowns, they all held the fragrance for weeks. But beneath this cloud of perfume, her body was decaying. Years of toxic makeup and a lack of washing had left her skin blistered and raw. It is said that in her final years, she ordered all mirrors removed from her chambers because she could no longer face her own reflection. She had become a prisoner of her own illusion. To wash all of it away, the makeup, the perfume, would mean stripping away her armor, admitting she was a fragile, aging human, and she had spent a lifetime convincing the world, and perhaps herself, that she was anything but. And now, for our final fact, we need to zoom out. From the Queen's body to the world she lived in. From the outside, her palaces, Whitehall and Hampton Court, were marvels of architecture. But behind the magnificent tapestries and glittering festivities was a world of unimaginable squalor. In these sprawling complexes, home to over 1,500 people at a time, there was no plumbing and no central sanitation system. The Queen's personal toilet was a clothes stool, a velvet-covered chair with a chamber pot hidden inside. The man in charge of emptying it held the prestigious title of Groom of the Stool. And this was no janitor's job. It was one of the most sought-after positions at court. Why? Because it granted guaranteed, intimate, and unfiltered access to the monarch, making the groom a powerful political figure. But the rest of the court literally lived in filth. Corridors, fireplaces, and unused chambers were treated as communal latrines. The contents of thousands of chamber pots were simply dumped into cesspits in the courtyards or thrown directly into the River Thames, the very same river that sometimes supplied the palace with its water. The floors were covered in rushes, which were rarely changed. The famed humanist Erasmus of Rotterdam wrote with disgust about English floors, describing a compressed layer of spittle, vomit, the urine of dogs and men, ale droppings, scraps of fish, and other abominations not fit to be mentioned. To combat the ever-present stench, servants burned incense and strewn fragrant herbs. But it was a losing battle. The filth became so overwhelming that the court was forced to be nomadic, constantly moving from one palace to the next, simply to escape its own accumulated waste, while an army of cleaners attempted to deep clean the abandoned residence. And this was the staggering paradox of her reign. The most powerful woman in the world, a symbol of purity and divine right, presided over a court that festered in its own decay. Queen Elizabeth I was no accident of history. She was a project, meticulously planned and brilliantly executed. Her bizarre and often dangerous hygiene practices were not the result of ignorance. They were moves in her great game of survival. Every skipped bath, every layer of lead paint, every cloud of animal musk was a calculated maneuver. In a world where a woman's power was precarious, Elizabeth made herself an untouchable icon, something ageless and more than human. She powdered, she perfumed, she posed, and she won. By our standards today, Elizabeth I was not clean, but by the standards of her own time, her image was flawlessly, sterilely perfect. In her reality, water was a threat and poison was a tool of power. She didn't just survive, she mastered the art of being seen without ever truly being known. Ultimately, her true cleanliness was not found on her skin, but in the indestructibility of her legend. And for a queen who fought her whole life for the throne, slowly, the legend was more important than life itself.